Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're watching this. This is episode 19 of the RosinBaggers podcast. Man, we are tallying up the episodes. Look in the top left here. Well, my right, your left, or depending on how you're watching this. But we got somebody back in the house here. Big stove. What is this? I can never tell with these cameras. But buddy, how you doing? We missed you. Glad to have you back here.
Yeah. I came back for one episode and then had to take care of just some end of season business stuff and all that. And so appreciate you guys holding down the fort for me for past couple of months and, tuned in when I could and listened to you guys. And man, you guys are killing it. I mean, this baseball season's been awesome, from afar, except for my Cubbies. But, we can get to that later. Maybe the trade deadline losers or something. I don't know. We'll get to it. But but no, happy to be back and start getting back into a more routine for me. So yeah, happy to be back, guys, and appreciate you guys taking care of business.
Certainly, bud. Glad to have you back. Ty, how are you doing, man?
Oh man, the entire landscape of the baseball universe has simply changed before our eyes. This is fantastic. We have new contenders, we have new pretenders, and we have the St. Louis Cardinals who sat on their thumbs and did absolutely nothing for the trade deadline. We'll get into that. Biggest losers by far, and I'm biased, of course. But St. Louis kissed that World Series championship goodbye for another season. We're just going to pretend to be mediocre.
Thank you.
So many good things and wild things. It was ridiculous to try to keep up on yesterday on deadline day, and I know we're going to dive right into it. So excited to get going here and talking trades.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So let's jump right in. And I don't think there's any question who the biggest winner is, right? I mean, if you're a second place team in your division and you're waiting on the reigning NL MVP to come back, maybe the most exciting player in baseball, and arguably probably the next most complete guy once Mike Trout gets out of baseball in Fernando Tatis Jr. And then you go trade for one of the most dominant closers in Josh Hader, who I know he struggled over the last 6 or 7 appearances, but he's still fucking Josh Hader.
Fucking Josh Hader.
And oh, by the way, you make the biggest splash at the trade deadline and you go get the coveted superstar who has 3 Octobers left on his contract. If you're the San Diego Padres, 2.5 seasons, but 3, most importantly, Octobers in Juan Soto. And yeah, you give up a bunch of prospects, but you've got to look at that lineup and say, we now have almost a complete lineup. We didn't lose any real major league talent, didn't break up the rotation, added to the lineup. Are they the favorites in the NL, or is it still them and the Dodgers? Is it sort of those two and everybody else? Stove, let me get your take, man. You're fresh back here in the saddle. What do you think of the trade deadline? What do you think of the Padres' moves here at the trade deadline?
Honestly, I don't like what the Padres did. Now, I know I'm going to be on my island here. Okay, I know it. That's fine.
That's all right.
I'm all right with that.
We like islands around the backyard family here.
We do. But I guess the one move that you could say, was good would be the Soto move. Okay, because like you said, he has 3 years left. Okay, and I'm assuming, with that, just like the Nationals tried to do, they're going to try and offer him a multi-year deal. I just don't know how that's going to play a factor when you sign Fernando Tatis to a long-term contract as well. Now, granted, Tatis, it's not as lucrative as Soto's would be, but you put those two into the long-term contracts, that's a lot of money tied up between 2 individuals. And last I checked, there was at least a 25-man roster and then a 27, 30-man roster and everything. So, and last I checked, offense doesn't win games. Pitching wins games.
Especially in October.
especially in October. So I do like the Hader move. I do like that. I think a change of scenery for Hader will do him good. Get him out of Milwaukee there. Long term, though, I think for the Padres, long term, I don't see this working out. I really don't. Short term, absolutely. This could work out if Tatis comes back healthy and doesn't re-aggravate anything in his wrist or anything else like that. But he has to come back.
So here's a question for you, because I think you are a little bit in the minority. I wouldn't say on an island. I bet you there's people out there that think that giving up those prospects long-term is certainly a risk. If San Diego wins a World Series in the next 3 years, is the move worth it?
Absolutely. I think anyone would take that deal. Yes.
So hindsight for you, hindsight is going to dictate whether or not you give this trade an A+ grade. You're not ready to do it right now.
No. I would say right now, I would say probably a B to B+, and it's more of a high B. So go ahead on the B+ here. But yeah, I mean, I think anyone. I mean, a Nationals fan. You guys just won the World Series, 2019? Yeah. A Cubs fan. We won it in 2016. We've been relevant, since 15, 16, 17, 18, and then we start dropping off. Okay. But as a Cubs fan, you had that
still have that glory of the World Series.
Yeah. But you had that long drought, so yeah. And on that Cubs team, you have Contreras, Happ, and Hendricks, and Hayward.
Yeah.
That are left from that 2016 Cubs team. So it really is telling. And it's really remarkable in this day and age of money in baseball, what the Dodgers keep doing year in, year out, what the Yankees keep doing year in, year out. I mean, with everyone that they have, and just, competing and being in the playoffs consistently every single year,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not against this trade, but I'm definitely not for it. But in the long run, I don't think it will produce a championship.
Ty, I know that you are happy about the Hader trade, but very surprised. I think we both were really, really taken aback. And Stove, I imagine you agree that a first-place team trading away their closer, one of the more dominant closers in the game. But looking at it from the other side, what do you think of what the Padres did here at the deadline?
Looking at the Padres, this little shiny thing here, this little World Series trophy 3D print that we made, they're going to get a couple. You look at the Fernando Tatis. You look at the Fernando Tatis deal. Buddy. He's got $340 million and 340 million reasons to not go into contract negotiations right away. $10 million up front, $25 million a year. And by the way, that's locked in for 14 years. So I think the Tatis contract situation is pretty well handled there. I look at Juan Soto, a 23-year-old, again, a 23-year-old who feels like he's been in the league for half a decade. Then you bring in Josh Hader. San Diego made all the right moves to say, we have the pieces together and we have a World Series team right here and now, and we're going to make a run for it, and we're going to make a run for it the next couple of years. They threw out with the farm system, say bye-bye to the 3 to 5 year plan for San Diego, and say bye-bye to 5 years from now. San Diego might fall back into to a Miami situation, but I think they're set up for 2022, 23, potentially 24 to be a legitimate 3-year contender in October for a World Series championship. Again, obviously the question marks on health are going to be on every team. So I look at that, and you get excited about Fernando Tatis Jr. coming back, and you look at that lineup, and that 3-4-5 is just ungodly with Machado and Tatis, and now you add Juan Soto in there. Pitching wins championships, but by the way, they made a great move there too. Before any of the deals, before they even got Hader, before they got Soto, they locked in Joe Musgrove to a long-term deal as a starting pitcher. So I look, San Diego was calculated during this trade deadline, and it's where I think a lot of teams fell short. Is San Diego just made all the right chess plays, and they didn't make them all in one big shoot. They didn't shoot their wad all in one day. They went out and they got Hader, and that was kind of I think maybe a bargaining chip essentially in the Juan Soto deal is, hey, now we've got our closer. We got our closer secured. Now we can go after the big bat, the big fish out in the ocean. And so for me, San Diego made all the right moves. I give it an A+. There's people floating it around, and it's worth the conversation. Was this the biggest blockbuster trade in the history of Major League Baseball? And I think when we're talking about deadline day specifically, deadline day, you could make an argument for it. Juan Soto was the biggest fish in this particular pool. There was multiple teams interested. At the end of the day, if you're Washington, you're ecstatic because of the haul that you got coming in with C.J. Abrams and Mackenzie Gore and a few others to name. I thought the St. Louis farm system was right up there with San Diego. But then you throw in Luke Voit to the deal, and all of a sudden, San Diego clearly had the best package moving forward. But that's what you do with your farm system if you feel like you have a team that can make a legitimate, ready-to-roll World Series run. Is you ship that farm system off and get prospects, and in comes Josh Hader, and in comes a potential San Diego run here at this World Series. It's going to be extremely fascinating, and we'll preview it coming up here later on in the show, because right away, first thing out of the gate, you get the Dodgers and the Padres. So it's fantastic stuff.
Yeah, and I look at what San Diego has done historically. This is kind of out of character for them, right? They made the splash signing and move with Machado here, but it wasn't the big blockbuster that Soto is, right? And Soto's going to be a $40-50 million a year guy, most likely. He's probably going to get $500 million from whatever team decides they're going to sign him, right? And we talked about Trout at the time was kind of the $500 million guy. He didn't quite get to that number, but he just about got there with the totality of his contract. San Diego is saying we're here as a player, and that's reminiscent of that's a reflection of the change in ownership from a handful of years back. And we saw when the new owner came in, the new GM came in, and they said, we're going to sign a few guys, but then they moved on from those guys. But that was a signal that, right, this isn't the old San Diego Padres that played the small market, woe is me, I can't keep Jake Peavy type of stuff, right? This is a new regime that wants to compete with Big Brother in their division, right? The Dodgers, Stove, you mentioned it. The Dodgers every year just spending money and making trades and making moves and signing people and blah, 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 blah. I love the move. And I'm not saying that selfishly as a Nats fan because Mackenzie Gore was included in the deal. I'm saying that because I like what it does to that lineup. You mentioned the 3-4-5 punch that they've got now with Soto, Machado, and Tatis. That's a dangerous combination that nobody wants to pitch to. And, oh, by the way, Jake Cronenworth is pretty good in that lineup. And they've got some guys in that lineup that can swing the bat. So I look at this for the Padres as they felt like this move was something to complete their roster for the next 2 to 3 years. If Soto only has a year or 2 Octobers on it, I think that maybe I'm a little more critical of this. But because he's got 3 Octobers left on this deal, I think this is the Padres saying, we extended Musgrove, we've got our ace in our lineup or in our rotation, and now we need to finish out this lineup to really make this thing work. And you put it perfectly with Hader. Getting him was kind of that final, okay, we're ready, right? We're ready. We've got a closer, a high-end elite closer at the back end of our bullpen. Let's go finish our lineup and become a real contender in this, because I keep having to remind myself too of, like, Tatis isn't in that lineup yet, and they are right on the heels sort of the Dodgers. I mean, they're winning a ton of games, and they don't even have the reigning NL MVP in that roster. So I like the move that they made. I understand the trepidation from a franchise building perspective of they gave up a lot, and I love it as a Nats fan. So I'm gonna put that out there. I love it as a Nats fan because I love C.J. Abrams. I really like Hassel, and of course the Mackenzie Gore piece is just that's hitting it out of the park because we're getting something out of Josiah Gray. Last year's trade deadline move, Keibert Ruiz looks like he's settling in. I like the return, but it also signals to me that this is absolutely the Padres saying we're putting our stamp on this for the next 2 to 3 years. As Les Snead says in the NFL, fuck those picks. This is the Padres saying fuck those prospects.
And you look at Mackenzie Gore from the Washington standpoint, and once he comes off the IL here in the very near future, I look at Mackenzie Gore as a guy that he was probably 6, maybe bullpen for San Diego moving forward. And Washington's going to be able to get him big league experience right now. And you're going to be able to see what he's got to offer here at the roster call-up in your rotation. You get some big league experience, get some just experience pitching at Nationals Park. We know that it can be certainly difficult for a lot of players to get acclimated to certain nuances of their new homes. And so, I love the move from the Nats perspective that they got the load of prospects and it shows that two teams are in the opposite direction. You had San Diego, who was ready to make a move and ready to be a legitimate World Series contender, and Washington, who really was on the rebuild, but needed to put some pieces together and needed some extra help in that farm system. So, I mean, it was an A+ trade on both accounts in my book, but Stove's dead on. If you're starting a franchise on MLB The Show and you want to play this thing and get the most championships in 10 years, it's probably not the move you make. You keep your farm system around. From a franchise building perspective, it's in that B to C range. But San Diego's not in that franchise building mode. They're in the we're ready to go out and we're ready to get a couple runs at a title here. And as I take a look at this, I can put it in very simple terms when it comes to front offices. San Diego's GM was playing chess. The rest of MLB was playing checkers.
Stove, jump in here, bud.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've pretty much said our piece on this whole trade and everything, but Talia made a comment here about Tony Gwynn looking down on all this. To me, it's kind of apples to oranges here because you're in a totally different market and era right now. Yes, if Tony Gwynn was batting the way he was when he was playing in this era, I think the money would be there. I think, Tony Gwynn may not, he would follow the money. He wouldn't be a Padres, for life. And you can say the same for a few other people on that, as well too. Not just hitting wise, but pitchers. What do you think, Nolan Ryan? I mean, we could go on. We could have a whole episode on, what would they be making if they played like that in today's era and in today's market.
Money's gotten fucking silly.
Yeah, Nolan. Yeah, exactly. And here's my take on all of this. Not just the trade deadlines or anything else like that, but the long-term contracts. And I know we've talked about it. I hate it I hate it for a pitcher. I absolutely hate. I mean, you throw in, just look at DeGrom, or Chris Sale. I mean, look at those guys. They've been on the IL more than they've been playing since they signed those big contracts. And to me, that's just, it's money wasted because it hasn't brought them a championship, And so as far as, what Soto's looking for, what the Padres have signed Tatis for, that 14, it's, and what, not Manny Machado, but Giancarlo Stanton, what the Marlins signed him for, and now what the Yankees are doing with him. Yeah, it's just, I I guess I get it in a way that you want to keep your star players, like that. But you're tying up a lot of money for a lot of years to where, 2 years from now, they could just start shitting the bed. And then you're trying to find a trade partner and you're losing out on money, and possible prospects too, because the trade value, and we talked about in our group messaging one of the trades, Joey Gallo. The Dodgers traded for Joey Gallo. I'm like, did the Yankees just give him away for free?
They took some pocket lint in exchange.
and then Ty came in with the dynamite drop in there that the double-A prospect. That's what he's worth now, is double-A prospect. And so but that's baseball. That's baseball. So
and on the flip side, I'm glad players are getting paid, right? Sure. You look at it from that perspective. If they're not getting paid, the owners are just, buying more yachts, and you see what happens in like Oakland, right? With that fucking ownership group. So I'm glad players are getting paid, but I understand what you're saying, right? From a long-term perspective, locking into these contracts. It's like when Pujols signed in LA, right?
Yeah.
They knew that the last 3 to 4 years of that contract, they were going to have a less than average Albert Pujols, but they had to sign into that because that was the competitive going rate. So when the money gets nuts like this, you get teams that get locked in and they get their hand forced essentially. So
no, I was going to make the point on Albert Pujols. He was 28 when he signed the long-term deal. There was no way he was going to get the
well played, Stowe. Well, he was
Gary, mute button. he's been here for half an episode, and I'm like, let's mute him already. But you're right. The hands get played because if you're an agent or you're one of those ball players, and you're looking at Fernando Tatis getting locked into a 14-year, multi-million-dollar deal where he makes more during an at-bat than I make in a year, you get it. And you have to accommodate that, and you have to adapt to what other teams around the league are doing. And so the long-term deals, as much as I hate it, from a franchise organizational standpoint, if I'm a GM, I can't stand them, because there's no way I can build when I got a guy that's on the hook here for 14 years, despite the fact that he's going to give me 7 great.
I 100% agree with Stove, and I'm curious how you feel about it, Ty, that long-term deals feel way riskier with pitchers than position players.
Huge. I mean,
it is crazy because DeGrom's a good example. Steven Strasburg, as a Nats fan, I could talk about him. You look at, I'm sure there's more examples and I'm blanking for more, but pitchers, it just feels like the risk is so much greater because of how much of a toll throwing a baseball takes on the body. Whereas position players, they just don't get subjected to that same sort of day in, day out, havoc wreaked on their shoulder, their elbow.
And then I wonder how much of that is on, and I don't want to categorize or stereotype MLB owners, but let's face it, the majority of them are absolutely dinosaurs and old.
They're old white guys.
And they're remembering the nostalgic 90s,
Nolan Ryan,
where the arms could go 120 to 150 pitches and could go for multiple seasons. The shelf life on starting pitching has, if you take a look at the last 7 years, just absolutely declined. But I think the carryover on these long-term deals for the pitchers is they got guys, he can throw 120 pitches, and he's durable and he's got great stuff, and it's just not the same. The stress that they're putting on the arms has absolutely declined the shelf life for starting pitchers. He's dead on. I mean, I don't sign a starting pitcher over 7 years.
We talked about the impact of the analytics of it too, right? Because everything in today's game is its velocity and its exit velocity, right? Like that's what baseball is now. And throwing 100 miles an hour is just absolutely devastating on the human body. The most unorthodox motion in sports, and I saw the sports science on this, the most unorthodox motion in sports is a pitcher who throws overhand. It is absolutely counterintuitive to the way the human body even works. So I can understand why, as velocity has increased, guys are throwing 100% on every pitch these days. I remember when I was learning to pitch that when you were a starting pitcher, you were at 80 to 90%, and you went and got 95% when you needed to blow something by somebody or break something off on them. You didn't throw 100% every pitch because you just can't on your body. It's insane. Guys like Nolan Ryan, complete anomalies. Walter Johnson, guys who just threw back-to-back days and shit, anomalies. The standard bearers are the guys like Maddox and Glavine and even Smoltz, who was just a big country strong dude. And I hate to say three Braves there to throw back to my youth because they were on Turner all the damn time. But that's the truth. They were guys who would throw 100 to 125 pitches, 7 innings every single night. You knew what you were getting. And they weren't out there overexerting themselves. And that's why they were able to start 35 times. When was the last time a pitcher, a rotation, got an average of 30 starts out of their rotation, right? A team got an average of 30. But there's single pitchers on. You look at some of the 90s teams, like it was the same guys every 5 days.
Yep.
It's not that way anymore because of the way that the sport has changed. I get it. It's analytics. But, yeah, you're absolutely right. The risk is just so much higher on pitchers. Let's switch gears here a little bit. I want to talk about your big takeaways from the trade deadline. Let's talk about maybe outside of the Padres, another team that you like what they did at the deadline. Ty, let's start with you here.
What teams we like? Because there's a lot at the trade deadline, I'll be honest, that I didn't like. There's a lot of teams that I really honestly think took a huge step back. I think the Yankees.
The NL Central?
The NL Central, I got them written down here, and the NL Central is circled and double underlined and all caps because they took a huge step back. I like what the Yankees did to get Gallo. I mean, you had to get rid of Gallo. Let's face facts and face the music here. And I think the change of scenery is going to do Gallo great. I really do. I don't like him going from a big market to another big market. I thought maybe a smaller market and non-contender, so to speak, would have been more up his alley. But he flat out said New York sucks and it's a shitty place to play.
He channeled his inner Randy Johnson.
There was a lot of things that were going on behind the scenes with that New York and that New York media. If you're not experienced to it or accustomed to it, it's ruthless and it's in the headlines every day. You could go on and win 70 games, what the Yankees are doing, but they're still calling you out for not being up to Yankee standard.
Not winning every game by 10.
And so, I thought getting rid of Joey Gallo was the right move there. At the end of the day, I know Yankee fans are upset about losing Montgomery to St. Louis, but the return that they got is an absolute clubhouse guy who wanted to be back in New York. He's a New York guy. And I don't know if he wanted to be back in New York. I certainly didn't want him to be back in New York. But Harrison Bader, when he gets healthy, the dude just goes 150%. He is the very embodiment of Charlie Hustle himself. He does not take a play off. He's the best damn center fielder in the game right now, in my personal opinion. So for St. Louis to lose a Gold Glover like that, the Yankees make a big move. No, he doesn't got the pop, but he's fast as fuck, and he's a great defender. And so I think the Yankees got a huge plus there. Like I said, I think LA took some minor steps forward, but certainly when you take a look at what happened in their division with the National League West and the Padres, it doesn't look like it. But I thought LA made some good moves, and we'll see how it all pans out. But I think as collectively, as a whole, I didn't have a lot of winners. I didn't. Yeah. I really didn't.
Yeah, I agree.
And you know what? Maybe one more I got.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then I'll turn it over to Stove, and maybe they'll just hand it off to you. I thought keeping Contreras and Happ in Chicago was good.
See, I want Stove's take on that because I was incredibly surprised that those two weren't traded. So, Stove, as the resident Cubs fan, I love that transition. What did you think of the Cubs standing pat with, you mentioned it, right? World Series holdovers. What did you think of them standing pat with those two players?
So let's backtrack a little bit here, okay? Wilson Contreras, all-star starter, okay? He's been with the organization from day one. He's not a Yadier Molina, okay? Well, he's not. But the dude has a fucking ton of this right here. And if you're an all-star star, and this is one thing I don't like. If you're an all-star starter and you're in the trade talks the next week, blows my fucking mind. And for the Cubs to put him out there on a fucking trading block, the heart and soul of your clubhouse and organization right now, with a organization that, you know, hasn't done much of shit since Hoyer and all that. I am, by all means, I am happy that both those guys are still a Cub today, but I do not like the way the organization has been treating some of these players. Rizzo, Baez, Bryant, a little bit more so Rizzo, okay, because he came over from San Diego back in 2012, I believe. You know, everyone, all those guys, they love playing in Chicago. You know, Rizzo wanted to be a Cubby for the rest of his playing days, you know, and you look at the contract that Rizzo got. It's a 2-year, $30 million. I mean, what the fuck? Who do you have over there at first base right now for the fucking Chicago Cubs? No one. And so I love that they are still a Cubs in the Cubs uniform, but I don't like the way the organization is going about things right now with some of these key players that know what it takes to win a championship and know kind of like, you know, you have to have that clubhouse leader. You know, that's what Rizzo brought to it. That's what Lester brought to it. That's what Hayward, you know, brought to it too, you know. And yes, Hayward's still there. But for those guys not knowing, and I get you never really know during the trade.
How did you feel about the video? I saw this earlier, the video of them in the dugout basically saying goodbye.
Yeah, it sucks.
And then the trade deadline passes and they're still on the team. Yeah. Like, how much of an emotional, just fucking roller coaster,
dude? I mean, yeah, I go through it, you know, every year. You know, I mean, you know, last year was it last year? Last year, I think. Yeah, last year fucking sucked.
I think part of the disappointment as a Cubs fan has to be that you guys didn't get much in return for Rizzo and Baez to really build the farm system. I just couldn't believe. I know their contracts were expiring, but man, it didn't really push the farm system to a point that you're like, yep, this was a foundational move. I think that has to add to it.
No, and you know, you see those videos where, you know, for Contreras, you know, last home game before the trade deadline, you know, I mean, good for Cubs fans for doing the standing ovations, everything like that, as rightfully so, as should, you know, anyone that has been with an organization for that long, that means something to that city, you know, but man, as an emotional roller coaster, just not knowing. I mean, and for them to keep going out there day in and day out and playing the way that they are, I mean, hats off to them for sure.
Yeah. You got a hat you want to tip to another team? I know we kind of forced your hand there with the Cubs talk, but is there another team you want to tip your cap to?
So the only other, I guess I'll just hit on them real quick and then you can go here. Red Sox. Red Sox don't like what they did. Just from hearing things, their clubhouse has been kind of disarray just with ownership. And the players were out there saying, you know, we can win with the guys that we have in this clubhouse. And then literally you're getting ready to play the fucking Astros and you trade your starting catcher to the
changes dugouts.
Just change the dugouts. Yeah. And you could see the emotion in his eyes as he's walking away. You know, you could tell he has, you know, the waterworks coming. And I think there's some disconnect there with coaching, with the players and ownership in there. So definitely don't like what the Red Sox did. And then the Toronto Blue Jays getting a player from the Kansas City Royals.
Did he sign an agreement to get vaccinated? Like that?
You know, that move right there. I mean,
that's a head scratch.
Yeah, definitely.
So good player.
Absolutely.
But he might not be able to play.
He might not be able to play. So, I mean.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
They're planning on being the away team in the World Series. And they'll just win those 4 games.
Yep.
No, that's a good take there with the Blue Jays. Ty, I want to piggyback a little on your Yankees conversation, too. I liked what they did in terms of pitching as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Added an arm to the bullpen, added an arm to the rotation. Now, Montaz is a guy who can be up, can be down a little bit, but I think he's a quality starter. But I love that they added some length to that bullpen, one more arm to that, especially, you know, moving Montgomery. Getting Bader, I thought, was a big need for them because they are not at all a very strong team in the outfield. Hey, Jeff, good to see you, bud. New follower on our pages here from last night. Picked him up, Backyard Blitz. Good to see you, Jeff. Hope you're a baseball fan as well. But I liked what the Yankees did. But for me, I'm gonna kind of throw a little bit of a curveball here. I'm gonna go down to Atlanta and I'm gonna talk about the Braves. I don't know that they won the trade deadline, but I love that they gave Austin Riley a huge extension because that dude is the heart and soul of that lineup right now in terms of what he brings to the plate, at bat in and at bat out. I know that Acuna and some of the other guys are kind of the heart and soul of the team in the locker room and the way they bring energy to the field, but Austin Riley is a difference maker in that lineup, and I love that they gave him money. They didn't go to the whole arbitration thing. Just pay the fucking guy. I wish more teams did that, right? Let's lock a guy up that we know is a big-time piece of our, you know, of our team. The Yankees with Judge can kind of be the counterpoint to this, right? You may have offended the guy to the point that he doesn't want to sign a long-term deal with you when you went through arbitration. So I love what the Braves did in terms of locking up their own. The Odorizzi move, I think, gives them a little bit of length in their starting rotation, and they traded away a closer that was a little bit embattled there in Atlanta. They seem to like Kenley Jansen. I'm very much opposed to Kenley Jansen. I think he's a pretty awful closer who still is a closer, but I really, absolutely dead. I love them locking up Austin Riley. Pay the man, keep him happy because he hits the ball a country mile. It seems like every single night he hits a ball that's somehow in orbit. So
he's either doing that or hunting deer. And
right,
I think
both on game day.
The deer comment, I think, pushed the Atlanta organization over the top, and they're like, "We got to get this guy. He's great. He hits dingers and he hunts deer.
Yep.
And it ain't deer season."
So Jeff's a Indians fan, so I'm guessing he's not a fan of the new name.
The new name.
Guardians.
Yeah, he's probably not on board with the bridge statues being the team name.
Did the Guardians do anything on the trade deadline?
No.
They didn't make a single ripple in the ocean. I think they just stood completely pat. They must have forgot it was deadline day.
So we've heard from Stove a little bit about his losers from the trade deadline. Ty, who do you got here? I know you've got a long laundry list of losers. Talk to me, buddy.
And don't say the Cardinals. Don't say the Cardinals because you want to know why, Ty. You want to know why?
Because you'll hit the mute button on me if I do.
No, I won't hit the mute button on you. I won't hit the mute button on you. Here's why, and I hate to give you credit here, okay? But you didn't sell your farm system. You didn't sell your farm system.
You did say it was not the Cardinals' move to make either, though. That they don't do these kinds of things.
Traditional.
But man, to get Juan Soto. Oof.
The Cardinals.
St. Louis is boring.
Yeah, and they're boring every single trade deadline, which I think here's the deal. St. Louis certainly didn't lose the trade deadline when you're talking about the grand scheme of the 30 teams in baseball. As a Cardinals fan and somebody who has been waiting and shaking a stick saying do something on trade deadline day, because this is John Mozeliak to a T. He doesn't have the balls or the brains to pull off the blockbuster trade and never has. And you had the great opportunity this year to land Juan Soto with the farm system. And just like I said, why did San Diego get an A for me on their trade? Because they had the pieces in place to ship off, to get the player that put them in a position to win a World Series, which I felt, honestly. Now, I know St. Louis needed pitching, and they accomplished a little bit of that with Quintana and Montgomery from New York. The verdict's still out. I think they're mediocre arms compared to some of the other ones that were out. You mentioned a team that won, or we didn't mention a team that won, the Phillies, getting Noah Syndergaard. I thought Thor would have been a better arm for St. Louis.
And Brandon Marsh, who makes that outfield much improved defensively, but also is a decent bat in that lineup.
For sure. So we accomplished what I think the front office was set out to accomplish, and that's get two more arms to have a steady rotation. Steven Matz hasn't pitched more than 6 innings per start, and he's constantly on the disabled list. Jack Flaherty is probably not coming back till mid to late August now. So you needed to get arms in that rotation, and they accomplished that. But I felt the big fish was in the water, and this was an opportunity for St. Louis to finally seize on one of those whales, which is just not a St. Louis move. So I
think this goes without saying, but I have to hear it from the Cardinals fan.
Yes.
You would have given up Dylan Carlson to get Juan Soto, in addition to the other prospects that were on the table.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't have made the Harrison Bader move after that. I would have kept a outfield that would have consisted of Tyler O'Neill and Harrison Bader, and then maybe moved a Lars Nootbaar, or maybe throw a Tommy Edman in there and call it Mason Wentz. There was several options. Oh yeah, by the way, you got Juan Soto, so you wouldn't have to move that. You wouldn't have to move Lars Nootbaar. Silly me. I make a great baseball executive.
We're going to talk about him in a minute, Jeff, for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
St. Louis. St. Louis to me is a loser because they didn't have the initiative to say that this is a World Series team this year like San Diego did. Milwaukee is a huge loser because I don't know what the fuck they did. They just, for no reason whatsoever, out of the blue.
Yeah.
Completely out of left field, let's give away our closer. And let's get back what? I don't know. The verdict's still out. Milwaukee is a loser for giving away Josh Hader for no reason. Fathomably.
He must have said something about the GM, like offended the GM, or he's got he's got some dirt on him, or I don't know, man. That was such. When I saw it, I thought it was a fucking typo. That I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it that the Padres got Hader. When you wrote it in the group, I hadn't even seen it. That's how much out of the blue it was for me. I hadn't seen it past the news ticker yet. And I looked and I was like, wait, did Ty mess up there and not, like, was it a typo? And I go to MLB.com and sure as shit, fucking Hader got what? It just doesn't. You're in first place. Mm-hmm. He's the elite of the elite in terms of today's closers. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, again, it's just as out of left field. You don't know the situation there that happened to Milwaukee's closer, but he goes instantly on a World Series contender. So I guess big winners is Josh Hader in my book. Milwaukee Brewers, big losers. Other losers, let's just quickly highlight them. I was heartbroken to watch Trey Mancini leave Baltimore, and then is it Jorge Lopez, the closer, also getting shipped out of Baltimore. And we just got done talking about it a week ago that if Baltimore could have held the pieces together.
Just stand pat.
Just do Guardians. Don't do anything.
Right.
Not doing anything.
All you had to do was do nothing.
Stay in your lane, Baltimore. But instead, you mentioned with Willie Contreras about heart and about being the heart and soul of the franchise. Trey Mancini was that and more. If there is a and more category that you could throw a player in for being a heart and soul of a franchise, that's Trey Mancini. That's the guy. So I was personally devastated to watch him leave Baltimore, and for that fan base, that just sucks. The other loser in my book is a loser because they sort of stayed in neutral when everybody around them got better. San Francisco, didn't do himself any favors, and oh, by the way, the rest of that division got really good over the trade deadline, except for maybe the Rockies and the Diamondbacks, but they're irrelevant at this point anyway. San Francisco is probably out of the playoff picture because of the lack of moves they made.
On that, they had two options, right? Peterson? It's either move Peterson, move Rodon, and get future pieces, right? And maybe replenish some of the farm system or build on top of what they already have in the farm system, or go get something to get you over the top to become a playoff contender. It felt so weird that the Giants did neither, right? Mm-hmm. I thought falling below 500 may have been the indication for them it's time to sell, and they were going to move Rodon and Peterson. I didn't expect them to fucking just stand pat. Like, they didn't do anything to improve this year or next year in the next few years. I'm with you 100%. Losers at the deadline, San Francisco Giants. They didn't do anything to either set themselves up for the future or set themselves up for a stretch run here. Stove, go ahead.
No. I mean, I'm with you guys on that one. It's just like you have the Dodgers, you have the Padres. You're sitting below 500. You have two pieces that you can get some picks and, some players, for future, and you don't do anything. So, yeah, I'm totally with you guys on
or
that.
Or if you're going to keep them, go add something to your roster.
At that point in time, though, you're below 500. You have the Padres who just fucking got fucking Soto. Yeah. And you're not going to catch the damn Dodgers. So it's just like, I mean, you're not making the playoffs. That's where I'm at with it. So why not get yourselves better for next year or 2 years from now? Something down the road.
The River Dogs.
Yeah, buddy.
Is that where that AA player was from that went to New York for Joey Gallo?
It might have been. So I'm going to highlight one more loser here. For me, it's the New York Mets, and I hate to stay in the NL East here, but they did almost the same thing that the Giants did, but they're a first-place team. I don't know how, as a first-place team, you just kind of stand pat at the deadline. They made some very small moves, and I know there's people out there trying to inflate it. I read a couple of articles today that were like, oh, the Mets didn't make big moves, but they plugged holes in their roster. They didn't plug holes in their roster. They threw bubble gum at holes in their roster. They didn't make any moves to improve that roster. They didn't make any moves to lengthen the rotation, lengthen the bullpen, or lengthen the lineup. I look at what's going on in Atlanta as they're starting to get healthy. Plus, they added Jake Odorizzi, and they got rid of a guy in Will Smith who they didn't know how to use him because he's not a setup guy. Mm-hmm. He's built to be a closer, but he's not good enough to be the closer on a World Series team. He struggled. He made everything interesting last year in the playoffs, and they didn't want that anymore. The Mets just they essentially just said, we're good with what we got. And I think if I'm going to give them any credit, I think that they're hoping Jacob deGrom is making rehab starts. Mm-hmm. And if he can get healthy, then you're looking at a rotation that is very dangerous. You got Scherzer and deGrom at the top of that rotation. But I personally don't think that I would have gone into this trade deadline saying Jacob deGrom is going to come back this year and we're good. So I just, as a first place team, thought that the Mets were going to make a move And I know my dad's over there right now as a Braves fan saying, yeah, Mets, don't make any moves, right? Because we're coming for you. Because they've already said, starting in about mid-May, we're coming for you, bud. We had a bad start, but we're coming for you. I just didn't understand the Mets not being a player for a Montas or a player for somebody in the bullpen, right? Bring in an arm that can get you some innings in the middle of a game. So I have to chalk the Mets up as a loser simply because they're in first place and they did nothing to really say we're in this to make this run.
They didn't rotate the tires. They didn't change anything to the vehicle that's going to get you on a stretch run to October.
Yep.
They got under the hood. They tinkered with a few things. They may have changed the blinker fluid.
The blinker fluid.
You hear that?
That's about what they did. Yeah.
Right. They got in there. They tinkered, but they didn't make any major overhaul moves that set them up for a long stretch run, in my opinion. I'm with you.
I love the blinker fluid reference. Yeah. Because it does feel like they did something similar to that.
The entire time I'm thinking in my head, don't say blinker fluid, don't say blinker fluid, don't say blinker fluid. I set myself up for that.
Don't think of a pink elephant.
I RosinBaggers podcast and cursed myself.
For sure. All right, I'm going to open the floor. Any closing comments about the trade deadline before we shift to looking at last week and this week? Anything you want to close with, or should we shift gears here?
I have gone through my 2 sticky notes.
I like it.
I
like it. All right, let's get to last week's review here, Stove. Yeah, we got to get back to the brand. We've been yammering for about an hour here.
Review.
There we go. All right. So last week we talked about the Padres Twins series. I'm going to pass it over to Ty. You were looking at a pitching matchup that didn't happen. However, talk to me about this series.
There he is. Max Scherzer was supposed to get the ball going up against Sandy Alcantara. It was supposed to be a showdown of potential NL Cy Young Award winners. It didn't happen. And maybe the most surprising thing is what did happen on Friday night. And Sandy taking the ball and really, for the first time this season, it looked human. Didn't look like an NL Cy Young Award winner in that Friday night contest versus the Mets. The Mets took this 6-4. If anything, we just got done talking about the Mets, but a player that was really – he's always impressed me with his athletic ability, but his consistency just hasn't been there. He was consistent for 3 damn games this series. He was always coming up with the big hits, extra base hits, RBI base hits, 2 out, runners in scoring position. Francisco Lindor had a hell of a series and has really –
he's coming into his own. He's becoming the guy that they traded for.
I agree.
They traded from Cleveland. Yeah. He's becoming that guy again for the Mets.
Totally agree. Carlos Carrasco had an excellent showing on Saturday, which isn't really a surprise, but complete game shutout or getting the shutout for New York. I thought with some of the bats there in that Miami lineup, and of course some of the bats in that lineup have got the stick taken out of their hands. You mentioned a Jazz Chisholm injury. That happens 2 days before I'm supposed to preview this series too, or review this series. That didn't help the magnitude of things, but New York was impressive. You win the first game 6-4. They rough up Sandy. They blank the Marlins in the next game by a score of 4-0. And then another 3-hit performance from Francisco Lindor as they go for the sweep, and they do it in pretty easy fashion. Smooth sailing for New York over this weekend against the Marlins. They win the 3rd game 9-4. So again, there was some key pieces that I was putting together for that series that I was really excited for. And then by the time the series began, none of those pieces were in place. It's like what happens whenever I make baseball trips and I'm going for one reason and that one player has the day off that game or something. That happens to me all the time. That said, New York.
I went to a Padres. I can sympathize with that. I went to a Padres game once when I was stationed in San Diego. Jake Peavy was supposed to start. I can't remember who the opposing pitcher was going to be, but it was good. It was a good matchup, and both pitchers got scratched because of rain the day before. They moved the rotation down, so Peavy got another day's rest, and the opposing pitcher got another day's rest.
Ultimately, at the end of this series, it was huge for the Mets to get a little breathing room from the Atlanta Braves. You look at what New York has done in the last 10. They've won 8 of their last 10 games. Picking up a 3-game series sweep against the Marlins was huge in terms of the NL East standings, because now, like I said, it's still close. It's still very competitive. This is still going to go down to the wire. It's going to be one of those races that we watch until the very last week of the regular season. But they've got at least room to breathe, where I didn't feel like they had that breathing room at the start of the series.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to agree with you 100% about that breathing room, because I think what we're going to get in the NL East is an actual pennant race this year, where the Mets, I don't think the Mets are going away. Even if Jacob deGrom doesn't come back, they're getting really good pitching out of Carrasco. Obviously, Max is who Max is, and that lineup continues to be able to put runs on the board. I think we're going to get a really, really interesting September with the Mets and the Braves at the top of that NL East. And I know my dad's going to be tuned in for all of it, because that's going to be a super competitive pennant race down the stretch. It's 3.5 right now. That is kind of a small whisper of an earshot away. So I love what that division potentially brings to us, because there are some divisions that aren't super competitive. I'm looking at you, the AL East. I'm looking at you, the NL West. Even with the Padres adding what they added, I think that addition was made for October, not so much the chase and the pennant. So I love what the NL East is going to bring us in terms of a competitive division race here with 2 great teams. There's other divisions that are a little bit down in terms of the AL Central. I'm looking at you specifically. I don't know what's going on there with those teams, but that could be a competitive pennant race of bad teams.
It'll be great bad baseball.
Right. Exactly. But I love what the NL East is potentially going to bring us here in August and September. Looking at where I was with the Padres and Twins, I specifically highlighted this not because of the matchup of the 2 teams. I specifically highlighted this because last week, Fernando Tatis started taking BP on the field. Now he's facing live pitching, and we're looking at him making rehab starts here in the near future, probably inside of 14 days, him getting a rehab start in AAA. I'm optimistic that we are going to see Soto, Machado, and Tatis all in that lineup inside of 21 days. So inside of the month of August, I'm bullish. I know. I see your eyes over there still. I'm optimistic and I'm bullish that we are going to see that lineup before the end of August here, and I'm excited for it. I love that he's taken BP against live pitching, because that means he's progressing very quickly. He went from really controlled BP on the field to live pitching within a couple of days. I love that progression. That tells me he feels really good about where the wrist is at. That tells me the team is confident in where the wrist is at. I can't wait to see Fernando Tatis back on the field, because I love watching these exciting young players. I say it all the time. I'm kind of the curmudgeon when it comes to, I'm a traditionalist with baseball, but I really, really enjoy when guys can play the game, but also have fun with it, show some of that flair. I love the bat flips. If you're a pitcher and you're mad about a bat flip, guess what? Throw it where he ain't going to hit it. Get him out. You don't want him to flip the bat, don't let him hit it a country fucking mile. I love Jazz Chisholm with the Euro step to home plate. Fernando Tatis brings a lot of that. 3-0 home runs. That's the big thing with Tatis, and I love it. I love it.
Instant update. Speaking of Juan Soto, you want to know how you piss off an entire fan base in one 4-pitch walk to Juan Soto in his very first at bat? Juan Soto gets walked by Colorado, but get used to seeing this. He gets walked by Colorado. Machado then doubles. Cronenworth then hits one into the gap. And then there's a home run. And in the bottom of the first inning against the lowest Colorado Rockies, it is already 5-0 San Diego one day after getting Juan Soto.
Listen, Soto faced a lot of that in Washington, but he's going to have protection. And you put that perfectly. You walk him, then it's a double, then it's a ball in the gap. That lineup is going to make pitchers either pitch to Soto or Machado or Tatis, pick your fucking poison. And I think Soto, who had a real rough start to the season, pressing contract, all the nonsense that was going on around him with Washington, you're going to see him get some pitches to hit, and you're going to start to see why a lot of people, myself included, call him the most complete hitter in baseball. All right, let's talk about preview of next week. Stove, I'm going to pass your way, buddy. Boston, Kansas City, talk to me.
Two teams here that I thought sucked at the trade deadline. Obviously, I touched base on the Boston Red Sox with their starting catcher. But then the fucking Kansas City Royals. And Ty, I know you're closer to them than I am, but still being somewhat from that area, growing up and everything else, I still followed the Royals. And then you trade away two guys that, are difference makers in the lineup and in the organization and the clubhouse. So yeah, this week's matchups for two trade deadline losers here. I suspect and expect the Red Sox to come out on top here, but it would not surprise me for the Royals to take 2 out of 3 here from the Red Sox, just because they're the Kansas City Royals, and you never know what you're going to get with them. With whoever they have. I'm surprised you didn't touch on them, Ty, as far as because you're high up on Ben. I can't pronounce his last name.
Vinny Pasquantino or Andrew Benintendi? Yeah,
Benintendi.
Benintendi to the Yanks, yeah.
Yeah, you were high up on him and everything, and it just I don't know. So I'm interested to see just how this matchup goes, especially with the Red Sox and some of that turmoil that I touched base on earlier with ownership and everything. So I know it's really the second series after the trade deadline, but first full series after the trade deadline. But yeah, it'll be interesting. See what the Red Sox can do as far as offense goes, and go from there. I mean, last night, pitching kept the won the ball game for the Sox against the Astros, but they need to get the bats going again.
They're so cold on the bats, and it so confuses me because they have all the talent.
They do, and before earlier on in the season, their bats were warm. Their pitching was not. So I mean, and I know you go and sports and everything. No, they have not. They have not. So
sure. All right, let's look at Ty's series: Dodgers, Padres.
What?
I'm excited to hear your take on this, buddy.
That's a fucking giveaway.
Yeah, this was any other podcast, any other moment in baseball history, it would have actually been a very tough weekend to pick a series for.
Yeah.
Because we have meaningful baseball being played starting
right
tomorrow.
Now.
Yeah. We
nice
have
4-game series.
Huge baseball series going on across the diamond. So there was a moment where I was like, I'll take Yankees versus the Cardinals coming up this weekend. I can jump on the Braves versus the Mets coming up starting tomorrow. There was a lot of different avenues. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, the Padres are playing the Dodgers. It's our first opportunity to see the two juggernaut lineups. Minus, of course, Fernando Tatis Jr., which is still the hesitancy there. But it's the first series with Juan Soto. Obviously, all eyeballs are going to be on San Diego and what that offense can do. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I was going to put you on the spot where you said San Diego, it looks like it's a run for October, probably not in position to catch LA at this point, or are they? Can San Diego do a little 3-game sweeperoo of the LA Dodgers? And all of a sudden, that's a different race.
If they sweep, then I'm eating crow because it's listen.
And Ty, that has happened several times before.
It has. I'm not afraid to eat the crow when I'm wrong. I will absolutely own that shit.
You will.
But if they sweep, certainly we're looking at 8.5. As it stands right now, of course, tonight's results not pending, but or not completed, but 8.5 with almost 7.5 weeks to play absolutely, right? Then San Diego's looking at, hey, we could chase this pennant for sure. I based that comment earlier on the fact that it's 11.5 right now, but like I said, I'll eat that crow if they sweep here.
One of the exciting pitching matchups that I'm stoked for, and a big storyline, I think, here in the second half of the season when we're talking about the NL West leading Los Angeles Dodgers, and one that really flew under the radar in terms of him going on the injured list and now coming back, is Andrew Heaney. And Andrew Heaney starts again on Saturday. He has, on the eye test, all the indicators working for him, and it appears his rehab went very smooth because his last start, he looked like the old Andrew Heaney. And so I'm excited to see him go on the mound on Saturday. He's going to be going up against Clevenger. The Friday pitching match will be good as well. And then, Sunday they throw out, it's going to be Yu Darvish. He's going up Sunday for San Diego, and Tyler Anderson for the Los Angeles Dodgers. So the pitching matchups are good. Sean Manaea on Friday going up against Tony Gonsolin. It's all there. All the ingredients are for all eyeballs. Grab your fucking popcorn and sit back and watch some pretty good baseball. And I'm just curious. Again, I'm curious to see how much of a dent the Juan Soto move can make now without Tatis in the lineup. And if the Rockies game is any indicators, certainly don't use Colorado as a constant when you're doing a scientific experiment, because it's not going to go well. But if all indicators are, it's exactly that. Soto with protection is a damn scary thing. And so I want to see, because we talked about it, 1 through 9. You can't pitch anybody on LA's lineup. 1 through 9, San Diego is certainly looking and starting to form like a lineup that you can't pitch 1 through 9. I want to see 2 lineups like that go head to head against 2 really good pitching staffs. In my book, San Diego's taken a few lumps here and there on at least their starting rotation, but I feel like the guys are good enough to make this a hell of a series. This one could be fun to watch, and for me, is San Diego ready to enter into the conversation of contending with the Dodgers for the NL West pennant?
Yeah, I like that you brought up the pitching, right? They've taken lumps. I just had this exact kind of exchange with my brother the other day. If Blake Snell becomes the Blake Snell that we know Blake Snell can be, good grief. Mm-hmm. San Diego suddenly no longer is in the conversation of NL winners. You add him with what Musgrove is doing and what they can do with that lineup. Like Blake Snell can dominate when Blake Snell is right. He's not been right this year, but if he gets to that point, wow, what a bonus to that rotation. What a bonus to that team. I want to go back to Jeff Carlson's comment here about Cal Ripken, Mark McGwire. We love talking about legends. Let's talk about Cal Ripken for a minute, because one, right over here, I've got a printing plate of the newspaper edition of when he broke Lou Gehrig's record.
Iron Man, nice.
4 consecutive games in a row. However, there's somebody on this podcast whose child's named after Cal Ripken Jr. Stove?
Sure. Yes, sir.
The legend, right? The man, the myth, the legend.
Right, bud. I mean,
Cal Stovall.
Who doesn't like a little Cal Ripken Jr.?
Absolutely.
Man? And speaking of Cal Ripken Jr. and the Kansas City Royals, they traded away the guy that, had the longest active playing streak at like 500 and some odd games.
Yeah.
So it really
might not be able to play.
Exactly.
Now, if he has to sit because of COVID vaccine, does that ruin his streak?
Absolutely. You're not playing.
For sure. A game goes off that you're not in, right?
Yep.
All right, let's finish up here with series preview, and I'm looking here at Braves Mets. Okay, it's first place against second place. We just talked about Braves didn't make a lot of moves at the trade deadline. I love that they signed Austin Riley to an extension here. The Mets stood pat, but it's first place against second place, and we just talked about the Mets having what looks like sustainability here, that this race is going to be good down the stretch. And I know I just jinxed the Mets with the RosinBaggers curse. I apologize, Mets fans. You're welcome, Braves fans. But I like what this NL East race potentially has, because down the stretch they play each other. I looked at a couple of other divisions here, and the Astros and Mariners are done playing each other. That one stuck out to me. They're done. And it's the first week of August. They're done playing each other. I can't believe that. But it's this loaded scheduling that Major League Baseball has been doing. And I get it. It reduces some of the travel. It reduces some of the stress on players having to go across the country, et cetera, et cetera. But man, like, if I'm a division rival, I don't want to be done playing you in fucking August, the first week of August, right? So it's weird, but we do get some games in this division down the stretch. So I'm highlighting this series because it's 3.5 games right now. This series starts with a doubleheader. It's a 3-game series. This is an opportunity for the Mets potentially to either create some separation if they can take all 3, or the Braves suddenly are a half game out. As it stands right now, they don't play right away, but results pending. If it's 3.5 when they start playing, we're looking at potentially the Braves a half game out, and this race heats up a lot. So that's what I'm looking at here with the NL East. This is a series where it's within reach of the number of games in this series, and I love that. Whenever we get to August and September, when we're looking at there are 3 games separating these teams, they're playing 3 games in this series, we could really see some exchange of a swap in the, not necessarily a swap in the standings, but a change in what it looks like in the NL East.
I like this matchup too, and I like how it's first and second place here. And I know Ty's matchup was first and second place as well. But if you go back to last year with the Mets and their downfall after the All-Star break, it'll be interesting to see how the Mets handle themselves this year. I don't think you'll necessarily see that downfall like last year. And just for the fact that you added Scherzer to your rotation.
Bang. I as soon as you started talking about it, I was like, if he brings up Scherzer, I'm gonna tip the cap, because Scherzer's a steadying force, man.
Yeah,
that's what he is. That's what he brings.
Yep,
bulldog.
Yep. And that's one of those, exactly, bulldog right there. And that's one of those contracts that we were talking about earlier, that he got the long-term contract. This is one that's actually panned out. I know he was traded and everything else like that. But Scherzer, bulldog, and you can even say, Houston Astros pitcher,
Verlander.
Even though he had Tommy John, he came back from that and he's been pitching very well since then. But those two guys, as far as the long-term pitching contracts, those two have been bulldogs. Absolutely.
And players are a big part of it. I've talked and praised and continued to harp on all season the managerial job of Buck Showalter at the New York Mets, because you watch the Mets and you can do a mirror image of this team at the same time a year ago versus this team this year. And I just got done watching them in a 3-game set, and I actually sped watch it because I wasn't going to waste my weekend watching the powerful Marlins play baseball. So I sped watching on the highlights. But the confidence, the swagger, if you want to call it, the demeanor of this baseball team in 2022 is a 180 from where they were at 365 days ago in the race. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to the way Buck Showalter manages his baseball teams. I think he's the X factor here in this NL East race, in this particular series. When it comes to managers, I would tip the cap, even though, Braves got to the World Series a year ago, won the World Series. I still say Showalter has the edge when it comes to the dugout.
Yeah, for sure. I love Buck Showalter, and you know who he reminds me of, and I'm going to make a reference to another sport. He reminds me of Marty Schottenheimer from football.
Yes, him and Dick Vermeil.
And Dick Vermeil too.
Yes.
Just guys who make a difference in the locker room, in the clubhouse, right, in baseball. I love the way you put that, Ty, because he is an X factor. Just the way he handles himself, but the way he handles the team, they make a difference. And I say that to the Marty Schottenheimer parallel specifically because I don't think Buck Showalter gets the respect in baseball circles that he deserves. And Marty Schottenheimer was the same way in football, that he didn't get the respect that I thought he deserved. Phenomenal coach, never won the big one. Showalter, I know, was a little different in that aspect, but it just seems that there's this feeling that Buck Showalter is kind of an also-ran in a lot of ways that baseball people talk about him, and it was the same way with Schottenheimer. But I agree with you 100%, and I think Stove is on the same page here that Buck Showalter's a phenomenal fucking manager. I just don't know what it is that he doesn't stick in certain places. Maybe he's got an approach to the game that doesn't necessarily mesh with everybody. I think he's phenomenal. I thought he did a great job in Baltimore. I thought he's done a great job almost every step of the way. And he is a difference maker for the Mets. On top of, as Stove put it with Scherzer too, having that bulldog that's been there, done that in that locker room. He's been there, done that with a couple of different teams here. Or 3 different teams really in terms of making these stretch runs. So I think those two combined could be a really steadying force for the Mets down the stretch. And we're going to see a different, as you put it, almost a 180 of what the Mets were a year ago. For sure. All right. We are getting close to closing time here. I'm going to open the floor. Stove, you got any closing comments for us here?
You know, second half of baseball, trade deadline has come and gone. And once again, the Cubs are still not in first place. So, great day to be a Cub. Great day to be alive, bud. I'm ready for some second half baseball. Let's fucking go.
Ty, how do you recover from that?
Cubs didn't lose today, at least because they had a rain out. They play in St. Louis, so we get a doubleheader tomorrow.
Who won last? I didn't even see.
Oh, 6-0. St. Louis blanked them.
Oh, okay.
I
honestly didn't even see.
I wasn't going to rub it in.
It's all good. It's all good.
We both had a pretty miserable trade deadline day, so I wasn't going to rub anything in on you. But yeah, it was my saving grace of the day, or at least it should have been, until about 10:30 last night when I got maybe the worst news that we as baseball fans got. Put your trade deadlines and everything aside. Vin Scully, from a broadcaster to a broadcaster standpoint, was a legend in the industry. I've said this multiple times on multiple platforms. Nobody did it better than Vin Scully. A man who could turn on a microphone and instantly transport you back to some fond and nostalgic memory from your childhood, all while being just locked in the happenings of the current game he was broadcasting. For me, growing up, listening to Vin was like taking a trip back to my childhood, running around the backyard with no shoes, drinking water from the hose, running through a sprinkler while hot dogs and hamburgers were sitting on the grill. And by the time the 7th inning stretch comes along, you're in a park watching a fireworks show, eating ice cream. Because good broadcasters have the ability to describe the action on the field. They provide some form of analysis to help you understand why what's taking place is taking place. Great broadcasters and there are very few, have the ability to literally transport you to some of the happiest moments of your life. Vin was a great broadcaster. He was a huge influence on my decision to pursue this wonderful career that has given me way too many highlights to mention. I've often tried to incorporate some of Scully's narrative abilities into my own broadcasts in my short 6-year career broadcasting high school sports. The loss of Vin Scully is not only felt by those who have had the opportunity to broadcast sports and shared in the joys of his profession, but it's felt by the entire baseball community. There's a huge hole in the baseball world today that seemingly can't ever be replaced. But it will be. not with someone else's shoes, but by the very fond memories that Vin helped us create every time he turned on a microphone.